Hi, Bhuvan, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on another session of TechBiz Talk, a knowledge series done by HCL Technologies. We hope you and your families are safe and in good health. I am Suraj Bharadwaj, and I would be your host for today. Before we begin the talk, I would like to share some key instructions with you all. During today's talk, all attendees will be in a listen only mode. For the best experience, please select the full screen view on your screens. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the talk. Today, we shall be talking about a very interesting field of cybersecurity. But before we move into that, it gives me great pride in telling you that we in HCL Sri Lanka have crossed more than 2,000 ideapreneurs, and also that we have inaugurated our new facility in November last year in Colombo in Cinnamon Life. The interesting thing about the office is that each floor is thematically dedicated to a city in Sri Lanka. Hirulu, may we please have the video? Indeed, what a milestone to achieve despite the global pandemic. Moving on to our main topic of the day, DFS cybersecurity. We have with us today our keynote speaker, Mr. Sreekumar S. Sri is the Vice President, Practice Lead Cybersecurity for Infrastructure and Cloud Security in HCL Technologies, and has over 3 decades of managing IT infrastructure and cybersecurity services globally. He's currently leading cloud and infrastructure security practice, responsible for new service development, technology evolution, and execution of security transformation programs. He has led IT infrastructure transformation projects across many regions globally, end user services, data center services, and cloud migration projects as well. He's a certified ITIL service manager and has successfully managed infrastructure transformation, operational planning, coaching, and development of technical teams to meet and exceed service delivery targets. I would now like to hand over to Sri. Sri, over to you.
Thank you, Suraj, for the warm welcome. And I wish to welcome all of you to this Tech Talks from HCL. Today, as it was said, cybersecurity is an interesting area for the whole globe. And we just want to probably take the next 30 odd minutes to talk about what is happening in the world of cybersecurity and what are some of these business drivers increasing the adoption of cybersecurity in their organizations. Then we look at what are some of the growth opportunities that brings for people across the various areas of experience or various skills people might have, and how do they develop and they can grow in their career, building a long-term job opportunities in the area of cybersecurity. So that's how we'll have the next 30 odd minutes, and then we can take questions at the end. Kirill, if you can move on to the next one, please. Yeah, as we've been observing in the last few years, uh, forget the pandemic. Despite the pandemic, of course, there are some accelerators that have speeded up certain adoptions. But in the last few years, organizations are transforming themselves to become digital enterprises. What are the key components of this digital or the 21st century enterprise? Primarily, it's on three different dimensions. One is all about the data that's created, and these data can come from devices, people, and systems. And then you have these data which goes into digital platforms driven by applications and consumed from the devices. So those are the three pillars of the 21st century enterprise. And These things have to be enabled with a robust infrastructure layer, then an application layer, and over on top of it, there is governance wrapped around it. Governance in terms of the local regulations of a geography which the customer might be operating on, and local laws of the land which every organization needs to comply with. So these are the three major pillars when we look at 21st century enterprise. And what does it do? How do we secure all this? Because the data is going to be everywhere, the devices are going to be everywhere, and the applications are also consumed from the cloud or wherever they are. So it's going to be a very big challenge, and hence this is something that every organization needs to be carefully uh, creating a roadmap around these security systems and to protect the three dimensions of data, applications, and the devices. So, and if an organization is able to do this successfully, then they can very easily go grow and scale as per the business plans, and then achieve their growth targets for their own businesses. So any impact to any of these three pillars, data, devices, or applications, uh, will impact the growth of the organization. And then there are other implications like there is a press news so that an organization loses the credibility and they may start losing customers. And cybersecurity is a very, very important area. And as businesses rely on digital as a basis for the growth, we'll have to also ensure that the security wrapper around all these three dimensions need to be well taken care of. Kirul, if you can move on to the next one, please. Now, what are some of the catalysts? One is this pandemic. Last 2 years, the whole globe has been impacted, and there is quite a bit of acceleration to these cloud type of technologies where things are getting adopted much more quickly than they would before the pandemic struck. What does it really look at in the sense of compliance? So if there are a lot of regulatory requirements that every organization goes through based on the geography that they're probably based in. So any breach that happens, maybe in the case of Europe, there are laws that really mandate any organization that faces a breach should report within X number of hours. And this is quite similar to a lot of other areas. If you look at in Asia Pacific, Australia has got its own requirements. Then Singapore has got, New Zealand has got, and Japan has got something. China has got something. India has got something. So each country has their own compliance requirements. So any incident needs to be really reported. Then there are business needs, which is for expansion. Digital is a very key component. And that's one of those, if you have to expand in a very short time, you have to adopt technologies which are purely digital, like cloud analytics, etc., which will help them make decisions and create products and solutions to suit the needs of a customer in a certain geographic region. So that's another important aspect of the whole business. Then there is also the other element of cost standardization or cost reduction. I mean, as things become more challenging for enterprises, they look at ways and means to improve their profitability and also standardize as much as possible so it is easy to support, easy to scale, and keep moving their budgets across the entire enterprise based on what business domains need those priorities, and then allocate the particular funding and to probably focus on the areas where the market growth is. And finally, many of these industries have started adopting the Industry 4.0, which is purely to look at the different ways of doing it, like creating platforms and enabling these platforms reach out to consumers as well as the vendors who provide support in creating products and services. So it's between the uh, business to business and business to consumer. All these things are driven by platform, and recently the pandemic has accelerated all these four different areas, and hence we have seen a rapid growth in the last 24 months, be it in the area of cloud adoption, be it in this area of security, data analytics, etc. So that these are the catalysts that we look at when why organizations are adopting these initiatives very quickly, and how important it is to have cybersecurity embedded as part of each of these different areas. Kirill, if you can move on to the next one, please. Yeah, that brings to what exactly is cybersecurity, and what are things that need to be taken care of. Now, as we all know, we are using devices, mobile phones, laptops, and maybe smart devices wherever, TVs, etc. And this explosion of devices is going to continue. And sensors are going to be embedded in everything that we see, right from cars to probably the electrical systems, home lighting, and devices at homes, refrigerators, probably cooking ovens, etc. So this is going to sort of increase, and it is going to explode literally. And with the availability of data on 5G networks, high speed data, all that, this is going to really generate a lot of traffic, and each of these will need to be properly protected. And there is an estimate that says from the WEF report, uh, the 75% or approximately 75% of businesses is expected to be hacked in 2020. Of course, this is a 2 year, probably 18 months old information. There are breaches that we hear about every day almost, and the size and scale of breaches keeps changing. Each one is done differently. However, what does it really mean? That means the threat landscape, because of the explosion of the devices, connectivity, and the network pervasiveness, the threat is increasing. So anybody having an access to a mobile phone or a laptop can become a hacker, provided they have the skills. And there are also things like opportunities for people to rent a hacker and then create some scripts and start exploiting the devices which are vulnerable. So where does it all lead to? Which means that you can't be really looking at only one area. Every different area of the entire IT landscape and devices have to be looked at. And that's where your static posture of looking at only things like certain firewalls, certain networks is not going to be sufficient. You should be aware and always be looking at threats which are coming from any possible direction. And you should be dynamic and also keep changing your tactics to detect them and then respond to them if such a worst situation does occur, and to limit the extent of damage. So that's where we really need to be very dynamic, and that's where HCL has built a dynamic cybersecurity framework which we use to deliver our services to our customers. Kirill, if you can move on to the next one, please. Yeah. So that is where this adaptation and securing the environments comes in. So now we spoke about the digital, and in the area of digital, there is identity, which is all about the ways that we log in, and then protection of information, that is very critical. Then come the cloud platforms. Cloud platforms are the basic enablers of the digital technology. We talk about the digital foundation, which is built on cloud. And then you have the data that sits on these systems, which needs to be protected either when they are moving on the wire or on the network, or when they are stored on servers or on the cloud. So that's the other dimension that needs to be protected. Then we spoke about the security of things, the IT and OT convergence that keeps happening in a lot of industries, where the IT systems were kept separately in the past. The OT systems were separately kept. The ones that are connecting to your industrial automation and manufacturing units were kept separately. Now, across various industries, there is more and more convergence of these IT and OT that's happening. So that really introduces quite a bit of complexity, which also needs to be managed from an operational technology standpoint. And there is also this dimension of identity being the new perimeter. Some of you may have heard of what zero trust is all about. It is that means the internet becomes the de facto network for everyone. So now when we switch on our mobiles or our laptops, everything goes from the internet. Even from HCL, if we look at, we access my HCL from wherever we are. It is really seamless. We could be in a coffee shop, we could be at homes, or we could be in any of the office locations. That definitely has become the default network for everyone. So what does that mean? And this means that identity is a very key component, which means the user IDs that we use to log in. That is the most critical component, which you will have to be detecting whether the person who says who really is he displaying the characteristics of a person who normally he is, and does he prove that who he is? So those are some of the elements from an identity standpoint. And this needs to be, let's say somebody is impersonating as a legitimate user, that needs to be detected. And the moment that detects, it has to be properly responded to or block access to the system so that there is no data breach that happens. And we spoke about the area of risk and resilience and compliance. So if something really bad happens, like a breach really happens, it should be reported to the authorities, and they also need to be restored to the point, or the risk to be mitigated to the point that there will be a lesser impact to the business as a whole. So those are some of the other things that we really need to take into account when moving in from a static to a dynamic posture. So continuously we keep evaluating all the controls that exist, then keep monitoring them, and if something bad really happens, that needs to be really blocked, and then we can respond and restore to normalcy as soon as possible, while operating under the bigger umbrella of compliance and regulatory reporting. If you could move on to the next one, please, Kirulu. Thank you. That brings us to the area of HCL cybersecurity as a group. What do we do? What are some of those things that we have, and what is our scale of maturity? So if you look at the left, there are this three pillars that we work on, the 360-degree services. We do strategy and consulting. This is all about evaluating an organization, where we are with respect to, or where an organization is with respect to the security standards, compliance, technologies, or roadmaps, etc., and evaluate them and create a plan of what can help them to improve their overall security posture, and how can they transform themselves into a much more secure organization. So that's one area which we look at strategy and consulting. The second piece goes into the transformation and integration. Once we create a roadmap, we really need to look at prioritizing and deploying the quick things, and then also things that may come in probably the mid to the long term. So that's an area that we work on, which is nothing but project implementation in the area of security, and integrating or migrating or deploying new solutions, etc. That's the second aspect to it. So first we have created a roadmap, then we have created a project to implement. Now there is also another function, the third function, which moves into the managed services. That is the operations. So once we deploy all these new technologies, migrate or probably deploy new ones, we really need to operate on an ongoing basis. And security is not a one-day affair. It is continuous. You need to be continuously looking at what's happening across the systems. If something really happens which is not supposed to be happening, it should be detected quickly, and then it needs to be responded to or blocked, and the risk should be minimized. So that's the third part, which is called the managed services operations. Now these three are the different type of services we offer, and then we move on to the areas in which we offer, which is called the solution domains. In the solution domains, we have some 7 solution domains, which we see in this middle part of the slide. The first one I want to talk about is the infrastructure and cloud security. The foundation of everything is on the infrastructure. It could be the firewalls, it could be the proxies, antivirus, next generation antivirus, like EDR systems, which is endpoint detection and response. Those type of things come in the area of infra and cloud security. And this applies to whether you're a hybrid, or I mean, we are an on-premise or in cloud or a multi-cloud or a combination of all this, which is called the hybrid cloud. So that is one area that we work on. The second part of it is the governance, risk, and compliance. This is dealing with the things like compliance to audits, compliance to standards, based on the industry requirements, geographical requirements. How do you comply and run your business to meet the law of the land, or look at how do you meet the industry requirements? For example, there are things like PCI DSS, which is related to a retail industry. and where your card information needs to be secure, kept secure, and if something really happens, you need to protect it. There are levels of encryption, etc. So, what are those standards that you need to put in place for a certain industry? What are your reporting requirements to a regulatory authority? All those things are taken care in that particular area of cybersecurity. Then we move on to identity and access. Identity and access is an area that is very, very critical. And now identity is everything. So if somebody steals your identity with a phishing email or an SMS, they can access to whatever you have as a person, either in your corporate environment, or it could be in your personal environment as well. So that's another area. Then there is an application security. Earlier we saw application data and cloud are probably the three major elements. So in that application security, application enables everything, and the applications have to be securely developed, right, and they have to be securely run. And there is a huge amount of change that as organizations go through, they need to modernize their applications, and every part of the development process of creating the code has to be securely tested before they go into production. And that is an area that we handle in the area of application security. Then we look at security of things, which is probably loosely termed as IoT security, because all the devices that get deployed either on factory floors or on or corporate environment, which are non-IT devices, but they are things or devices which probably are sensors smaller than the normal devices. These need to be really secured, and that is an area of capability that we have focused on the controls around IoT devices. So that's called security of things. Then you have the final one, not the final, but the last but one, which is data security and privacy. So everything is about data, and the data has to be really protected, whether it's at rest, whether it is in motion. And this is where you have different levels of data classification, data governance, data anonymization, and things like that. So that's an area that we also have as a part of our services. Then, if something really bad happens, how do you really respond back to that quickly and recover your systems back to normalcy? And that's where the central piece of resilience that comes in, which actually addresses all the other six dimensions to enable businesses come back. You might have heard of things like BCP and business continuity planning, disaster recovery. All that comes in the area of resilience. So, from a scale and maturity, we've been operating it for over 20 years, and it's a very mature practice. And we've got about 4,000 odd individuals working in the area of cybersecurity as an organization, and this keeps growing. Maybe it's now 5,000 because this created some time back. So, definitely. And we also have six cybersecurity fusion centers across the globe, which I will probably touch upon finally. Where are we located? And then there is a quite a bit of large partner ecosystem that we work with to deliver these services. And then and the bottom we have some our own frameworks that are created to accelerate the deployment and maybe the assessment and things like that in each of the different areas. And then finally we have our HCL software, and two security products are part of this HCL security software in the HCL software group, which is the AppScan and BigFix. These are two very important tools that we use to deliver our services in some of the areas of security. So that gives an overview of what we do. Now, Kirul, if you can move to the next one, building on top of it, where does it all help individuals? And this is where we spoke about the two out of the three dimensions on the left. We spoke about the strategy, then the integration or transformation, and then the operations. Now we take the second two areas, and the first one I want to talk about is the operations. If somebody starts their career in the area of security, they start off something like a SOC analyst or the security operations center analyst, and over a period of time that person becomes an incident responder, which is a very critical role, which really coordinates if a security incident so happens. So that how do we handle it at the situation? So that's the next path. And then subsequently they can graduate into the area of threat hunting, which is proactively to identify what threats are going on in the environment. Even before a threat really happens, proactively start looking for threats and then trying to address them. So that's the other one. Then we go on to the area of leadership, or move to the next level of operations leadership, which is all about handling the entire operations for a certain customer, or a group of customers. So that's the next one. And then in the area of then eventually moves on to a SOC head who can manage multiple customers, or an industry vertical, things like that. So that's the typical growth path. Now, what do we need to sort of get in there? There are different areas, and it's not the exhaustive list, but these are some of the common areas that we would probably look for people in these different areas. Endpoint security is one common area. Then there is a perimeter security, which is the firewalls. Then there is email security components, and a huge increase in the cloud requirements these days because of customers going into cloud, across the various clouds. It could be in Azure, it could be in AWS, GCP. And then there are things like security monitoring and automation tools. That's another different and very vast area as well. Now, then the area of vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So these are vulnerability assessment is a key area where you have to look at what is there in the system, what is there in the environment today, what are the vulnerabilities that exist, how do I exploit them, and those are two very interrelated aspects. And this is a very good area to be looking at from a career standpoint for those people who are starting. So that is it at a high level from the operation standpoint. Now let's move on to the next area. Kirulu, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Now, the first one we spoke about operation. Now we get into the area of implementation and projects. So people who are, there are two, I would say, parallel paths from the second step onwards. So people who have already experienced in operations and they really want to grow in the deeper level technical skills, then they can get into area of technical specialist or associate consultants, then becoming a consultant, and then a senior consultant, and eventually a principal consultant or an architect. So this is more of implementation type of roles, and then this could be pretty standard across. What I was probably alluding to earlier is I'm focused on the skills needed, common skills needed across these both. Only difference would be the level of depth, technical depth that is required. One focuses on how to run the operations. The second piece of this current skills slide talks about how do you look at it from a implementation and migration standpoint. So that's the level of, and the type of skills needed will be pretty similar. However, the focus level will vary. So that's where there is a difference between these two. And this will be more of a process oriented, deeper technical skills. Looking, it's a time bound work. Whereas the previous one we spoke about, it is all about continuous. So these are like project type of activities. The previous one talks about the continuous run function. So that's how these two. And I've taken an example only on the area of infra and cloud security. And similarly, there are roles in the area of data security, identity and access, governance, risk and compliance, application security. All these other elements also have similar skills. And I mean, those are some of the skills that probably require some level of basic background on all these skills, like maybe a couple of years, and then you can branch out to those areas in let's say data security, GRC, or application security, based on the areas of interest and the skills that we develop over a period of time. However, the foundation skills are these, which people could start looking at. Kirulu, if you can move on to the next one, please. And then now we just want to talk about the partnership ecosystems. We spoke about this 7 different domain areas. Here we have an extensive partnership across all the key players in the market, who are leaders in their own specific areas. So in cloud, we partner with all these top tier vendors like Palo Alto, Zscaler, Trend Micro, Checkpoint, Cisco. Now, then when you look at network and security, it's again going back to Palo Alto, Fortinet, Cisco, all those players. Then in the area of identity, Microsoft is a very key player, and then we work with CyberArk, then Okta, BeyondTrust, Savient. All these are key players in the area of identity access. Then when we look at endpoint protection, Microsoft is a very key player, and then we have McAfee, Trend Micro, Proofpoint, all those other players as well. Risk and compliance, we work with GRC of ServiceNow, GRC of MetricStream, then we have SAP GRC and things like that. So that's another area. Then in the area of security intelligence and analytics, which is all about monitoring and automation, we work with IBM is our key partner for our platform. Then we work with Splunk, Simplify, all these leaders in their own aspects. And then the area of application security, vulnerability management, we work with Qualys as being a leader on that. Then we have our own AppScan, which augments some of these capabilities which doesn't exist elsewhere. Then, of course, IBM is a good player and a big player in application security with the AppScan product. Then on IoT security, we've worked with Indigi, Clarity, Fortinet, etc. And finally, on data security, also we have players like Newegg, Gemalto. Microsoft has also got added very recently. So these are some of the partners we work with, and again, all these partners are used widely in the industry, and we have capabilities on all these, and our customers also go with these as the primary partners. So Kirill, if you can move on to the next one. So, I mean, having said all that, now where are we as a company from an external recognition standpoint? We have been recognized by all the leading analysts for cybersecurity services, Everest, Avasant, ISG, HFS, all these people. I mean, I don't want to read every one of these, but in every area. And recently, we have also become the managed security services, which is a very as recent as 2 weeks ago. That's not included in this slide. We have become one of the leaders. We've been rated as one of the leaders in the global MSSP, which is a managed security services provider, by one of the analysts. So that's something that we're really proud of. And we are one of the leaders today in the area of cybersecurity services. So Kirill, if you can move on to the next one. So our global presence, I briefly touched upon our cybersecurity fusion centers, and these centers are located all over the globe. We have three locations in India: Chennai, Noida, and Bangalore. And then we have one in the Europe to cater to the Europe region, which is based in Gothenburg. Then there is one in Frisco, Texas, in the US, which caters for the US geography. And one is planned in Melbourne, which is probably coming up maybe this year. It got delayed because of the pandemic. It was supposed to be launched 2 years ago, but it got delayed. That's something we'll be launching soon. So that's the global presence. And what you see here is some of these are a full-fledged emergency response teams embedded as part of these global delivery centers. So that's a very key component that our customers look forward to. And then if you can move on to the next one, Kirulu. Yeah. So what we say, I just summarizing what we went through today so that it's easy to probably relate to. We spoke about what the overall cybersecurity background is, what is the context. Then we went into some business drivers. Then we spoke about the domains of cybersecurity that HCL works on. Then we have the career paths that probably are available for people in the area of operations, into the area of projects. Those are some of the things we looked at. And then some of the areas where you could consider looking at the different technology or the different domains. What are the options from a career standpoint? And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to sort of look at it and how do you jump in, get into the world of security and become a part of the culture of the entrepreneurship culture of HCL. With that, I would like to thank you all for listening in patiently, and I'd open the floor for questions unless Kirulu has got something to say.
Thank you, Shri. That was such an insightful talk. We shall now begin our Q&A. Our first question, Kirul, let's have it on the screen, is from Ahmed. What is the immediate impact of spike driven by pandemic on the cybersecurity?
That's a very good question, Ahmed, and thank you for asking. In fact, this is what keeps our business running. And I'm sure you might have heard there are a lot of news that keeps happening, right, in the industry. And the pandemic caused a lot of fake news around, or fake campaigns, I would say, not the news, more of the fake campaigns, in terms of people receiving mails and attachments, um, and they really got hacked. There is an attachment which you try to open, looking at it as if it's a report on a certain pandemic in a certain country, which runs probably a script, and it tries to take over your account, and maybe move laterally and cause damage to the rest of the servers. And definitely, the immediate impact has been an increase in the phishing incidents. I mean, across various customers, and the type of tools that you have and the controls you have has helped us to sort of block them in their tracks. And the monitoring systems have helped us to also detect and respond to incidents which have probably caused a little bit more impact. So that has been our experience over the last 2 years. Ahmed, thank you. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Sri. This is from Shamika. How important are the prioritization of implementation given by the security status and threats of an organization?
Uh, Today, there is the cybersecurity is a board topic. I mean, that's the level of importance and priority given by our customers, whoever we are working with. And cybersecurity is the first priority today. And when you look at the implementation again, the priority defines their budget. And if we look at in the last 2 years, the security projects which have been sort of put on the back burner with a lesser priority have taken the higher priority in the last 18 to 24 months, and there is a huge amount of acceleration of these projects. So that really is a is sort of a proof is in the pudding, right? So naturally, the amount of requirements that we get from our existing customers is primarily a higher work in the area of cybersecurity and projects implementation. So that gives a view of how important it has become to any organization today. Hope that helps. Hi, Bhavanti. So the ID as a service framework, that is the identity as a service framework. Today, organizations have their systems on premise as well as in the cloud. So any access to these systems will have to be tracked in a proper manner. So there is the identity access as a service framework is a custom framework that HCL has built to help organizations utilize the framework to onboard and offboard, and also govern the IDs across the various systems that may be in your on-premise, SaaS, or IaaS areas. But if you have deeper level questions, maybe you can probably share an email through, I don't know, maybe Kirulu will explain at the end. For further questions, we can definitely lead you to the folks to have a deeper level of conversation on that if you're really keen in exploring that area.
Thank you. This is from Sumudu. Do you recognize any new challenges to individuals and organizations with the emergence of metaverse and IoT?
Yes, we we keep getting this quite often, and as we spoke, the explosion of devices is not going to reduce anyway, and particularly as new devices or sensors get added, they are going to need a lot of protection. And metaverse is only an implementation on how you use, or it's a layer on top of a physical device. It could be a mobile phone, it could be a laptop. Metaverse is an area that you get into virtually. It is enabled by an application using certain type of methods in which you create the application. So there are two different things. One is you'll have to protect the device, and there will be challenges in protecting these individual devices. If we look at in the real field today, a lot of organizations have sensors and controls, which probably have been deployed maybe 10, 15 years ago, and these were not connected to They were probably connected like an island into their own small networks, which did not generate a huge amount of data. Now, every control system provider, I'm just taking an example of a Siemens or Honeywell, and every one of them who are doing industrial control systems have also upgraded their systems to be IP addressable, which means that when they get onto the network, they really need to be protected. That's definitely one area where there is a huge challenge for organization as they deploy. Before they deploy, they need to have proper security controls around it. So that's one part of it. When you look at metaverse, it's more of a application layer which comes in. So even in the area of metaverse, there would be the application development process, and as part of the development process, any of the intermediate steps that people undertake before they create an application for that needs to be really secure. So there are certain standards and that people need to adhere to as part of the development process, and before it gets released into production also, there needs to be a lot of checks that need to be done from a security standpoint. So these two elements are challenges that any organizations will go through, and this needs to be addressed at every stage, and there are tools and services which HCL can offer in addressing all those. Hope that helps, Sumudhu.
And our next question is from Ruan. What are the challenges for a large organization like HCL from a business aspect in security, cybersecurity when growing?
Okay, this is very similar to what we addressed earlier. Large organization. The first point we spoke about is identity is the new perimeter, zero trust. So trusting no one, and when internet becomes the default network, the way in which we look at security has to really change, and that is at every layer. It could be identity, it could be a device, and as things grow, the challenges, if you see, how do you really look at managing anytime anywhere access to any applications, any application that is enabling the user of the organization or the connection with partners. So there are now we are connecting to our partners. There are things like APIs and cloud security that needs to be looked into, because right now when there are extranet applications which are connected to organizations, which means you connect to your partner, you connect to a service provider, you connect to a supplier. So all these are happening through newer systems which make use of APIs. And that's where the identity and the application layer, then your network layer, all these elements have to be looked into. Then the device that you come from, device has to be compliant. Only when the device has to be compliant, it should be allowed. And if the device is not compliant, you do some remediation. And even if you do that, if you sense something is wrong, you should be able to block. These are some of the things that we look at from a zero trust. So having a view of the controls that you can put in place, uh, organizations can mitigate the risk to a great level. Challenges are exploding devices, anytime, anywhere access. These are the biggest challenges organizations face, particularly people working from anywhere.
Thank you, Sri. Those were the questions for today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your questions. If you have any more, you can type them into the comment section of the platform you've joined us from. Thank you for your valuable time and presence. Please note that the recording of this live session will be available on the HCL Sri Lanka YouTube and Facebook channels. And with that, we conclude this TechBiz talk. Thank you once again for joining us. Stay safe and take care. Bohoma Istuti.
Thank you.